it says we're live, and as for now, it says we have an excellent connection. Pull my notes up real quick. It's the first time I have been live in a little while, and I actually just finished flight attendant training, so I've been really focused on that, but excited to get back to it. And if this is your first time watching a video or tuning in, I'm basically I've gotten some topics from some friends and family, and I've got everyone's name in a hat, and I'm pulling a name out and then going finding a topic and reflecting on it in the moment without really any planning or thoughts about it. Just creating a space to kind of explore these topics spontaneously and just see what comes up and record my thoughts about things and how I talk about them live, and kind of have them as like a video journal of how I was looking at things and understanding things at 33 in 2020 into 2021. So I like doing these at night because I feel like people that couldn't normally tune in are able to tune in. But if you hear any background noise, it's just because it's later in the evening and people are moving around, and there is life being lived in the house. And so I apologize for that. Yeah, that's what I'm doing, and excited to get back to it, and hope to start doing these mostly in the morning. That's my favorite time to do them. But also wanted to talk a little bit about the intentionality I bring to trying to have a little bit slower of a pace, and I really make an effort to try not to rush an explanation or a thought on something, and sit with it for a little while and see what comes up. And even in the beginnings of these videos, it can take a while for me to actually get to the topic, and that's intentional. I definitely, especially in the mornings when everything's just getting started, I want to kind of create an atmosphere that isn't hurried and doesn't necessarily have anywhere to go or anything to say, even though I am going to talk about things. And I know that can be frustrating, and I know that this is kind of a platform where people are showing up and wanting to get something out of what they're watching, and so that kind of atmosphere of some spaciousness and taking a while to get there, or talking about things that may not matter as much to you, is intentional. And I'm not necessarily doing that to make people uncomfortable, but I would kind of encourage, if it does make you uncomfortable, to kind of sit with that uncomfortability um, and see what happens if you're able to just kind of be with it and move through it. And because I'm not just, it's something I'm doing very intentionally. So I wanted to communicate about that. And then I'm actually going to take the first part of tonight to talk about mindfulness. It's been something I've been reflecting on today. And I actually um, have, through the process of doing these kind of live video journals, when I started doing it, I had hoped that they would eventually transition into something else. And maybe I'd keep doing it, but I'd also start something else, or I would fully pivot at some point to some kind of new project. And I already have 3 projects that I'm going to do that I'm really looking forward to. And the second of those projects is um, a surprise. But I'm gonna kind of do a, I guess, teaser. I'm gonna play with this idea of talking about mindfulness, and it will kind of be this little taste of what I'm going to create in the future. Um, but yesterday, I had this wonderful conversation with my friend Benjamin, who is one of the few friends that I have that is regularly engaged with the teachings of the Buddha, and also practicing some of the spiritual practices that different Buddhist communities have kind of created and come up with. Benjamin is approaching things more from a Zen perspective. And so a lot of the language, even, he's using is new language for me, which has been fun and exciting. And I have been approaching things from a Theravada perspective. And one of the things that came up in this conversation for me was realizing that in the midst of a lot of ideas about inner experiences and spiritual experiences and how they pan out, there's something I've noticed that can tend to happen where we can pull one idea out of a whole plethora of ideas that are interconnected and miss the bigger picture. And I think we've done this maybe the most with this idea of mindfulness. The word itself comes from Buddhism. It is part of the Eightfold Path that is the 4th part of the Four Noble Truths, and the path that the Buddha laid out to what we call enlightenment, or from the Four Noble Truths, the way that language kind of exists is the path to a life free of suffering, which is the way that the Buddhist community talks about freedom, is freedom from this human element of suffering that we all experience. And so um, the first way I want to talk about this is the word itself, and how, for me, it does paint a really beautiful picture of how I understand mindfulness experientially. And I, as I was reflecting on mindfulness, I was realizing I was really thinking about what it's like, what that experience is like for me in my everyday life. And it really is an experience where my mind is full. And I love that there's the ness on the side. So there's a full mind, mindfulness. And so I think that ness part, there's thankfulness, there's gratefulness, there's all these nisses, and that ness kind of implies that it's like something. There's an essence to it, um, that I think if we'll let it, it will take us away from engaging with the word as a concept and plunge us into the experience of the word. Um, and so that experience is my mind, my conscious reality, and the way that I am kind of taking everything in. It's full of whatever the experience is, and there's a fullness to my mind, and my mind feels very full when I'm mindful. It feels very full of whatever I'm being mindful of, and as that quality of mindfulness deepens, uh, there's a depth to the fullness of my mind in a really experiential way. Um, and this is a really, I think, human experience. It's we have this Buddhist language for it that's now being used a lot in Western society. But the first time I remember experiencing what I would call mindfulness, and really being conscious of kind of the moment. I think as we're little, it's we're more geared towards it. Um, but um, just lost my thought. Give me a moment. What was the first memory of my mind being really full? Well, I'll come back to it. See if continuing jogs the thought. Um, on my awareness of this experience, I was reminded of um, a conversation I had with someone when I was engaged with Christianity, and he was sitting. My friend that I was talking to had been sitting with um, this person who was, I think, in his 60s or 70s, and it. I believe the conversation I was having, the friend of mine was actually sitting with a monk. I may be mixing some stories, but it doesn't matter. The details don't matter. It was the meat of the conversation. But remember him saying, as he was sitting with this monk or this mentor, that he could tell that there this this person that was listening to him was thinking no other thoughts other than listening to everything that he was saying. His mind was clear of anything other than what my friend was saying. And he was reflecting on that experience, what that experience was like to have someone that was listening to him in that way, where there wasn't any background kind of um, thoughts on what was being said. Um, there wasn't any thoughts about earlier on in the day or in the future, or even thoughts on feelings, but that this person had created a certain quality of emptiness and had placed my friend's um, everything that my friend was sharing into that emptiness and was bringing so much attention to him in that moment. And I think that was the first time I wouldn't have called that mindfulness, would have called it presence, um, and attentiveness and deep listening. And um, I would have used language like, this is a person who really knew the heart of God, or who had an intimate relationship with the Holy Spirit. But the quality that he was experiencing, this monk, was what I would now call mindfulness, especially um, diving into a lot of the teachings on mindfulness within Buddhism, and then having my own experiences with cultivating it in my own sitting practice. I don't exactly remember what memory I was thinking of, but I will say that I think anytime we are listening to music that we really love, and um, we're dialed into that song or that piece of music in such an attentive way, there's so much of our focus on it, and our mind becomes full of whatever that is. There is a mindfulness to that moment that is really beautiful and special. And so I'm going to leave that there, my experience of what mindfulness is in that word. And I'm going to pause for a couple minutes and then give one more reflection on mindfulness, and then pull a topic. Okay. So this quality of mindfulness, you could also maybe call deep listening. I like that language a lot, a language of deep listening and understanding, as listening with our mind to what's right in front of us. or some kind of object that we want to become mindful of. This experience was talked about by the Buddha a long, long time ago. I'm really bad with dates and numbers and all that. And so if you want to look at how long ago the Buddha taught on mindfulness, you can, but it was a long, long, long time ago. And it was taught as simile I'll use as one type of flower in a bouquet. And you know, if there's let's say there's a really beautiful bouquet and there's pink roses in the bouquet, I think you can take those pink roses out and they're beautiful alone. But if you've created a really beautiful bouquet, having those pink roses complement everything else in that bouquet is really beautiful. Or we could look at it in terms of a symphony. We could take one instrument out of that, and it would probably be really beautiful, especially if that person was really skilled and was playing from a certain place. But that piece in the midst of the whole symphony creates such a more robust experience. And if we're not careful, that's we'll miss out of understanding the role that mindfulness plays in the way that the Buddha taught about it, and was mostly taught about in light of the Eightfold Path. And so I think probably the most helpful simile that I can think of is looking at mindfulness in terms of a nail gun. Was when I was reflecting on it, the simile that I came up with that felt like it fit the most. If we have a nail gun, and that one of the roles of that nail gun is to help build the house. That nail gun is used in conjunction with a lot of other tools and a lot of other materials to help build the house. And it's a really important one. It helps hold everything together. And for this simile, we could look at the house or whatever we're wanting to build as building the mental states that support awakening or enlightenment, or a deep and pure awareness, and a real space or quality of full freedom from suffering, and an inner abundance. And a lot of what's happened is when people talk about mindfulness, they're understanding it out as this gun that is being used for a lot of other things, typically not to build that house. It may be used to build really beautiful things, and it's very effective. It's a very effective tool, and that can be good. But if we think of it in terms of the end all be all, or this kind of quick fix, we are either missing out kind of at the least, or we can be, I think, severely misled. And there are some people that even teach that mindfulness is the full path and the only path. And if we just develop a full mindfulness, then we've figured it all out. And that's not necessarily untrue, but it's also not necessarily right, because most of the time an idea of a full mindfulness is talked about, it's not approached with the full symphony of the Eightfold Path. And there aren't other factors involved with it. And it was taught in a way that it worked in harmony with so many other elements, so many other tools, and so many other different flowers or things to add to that bouquet. So yeah, I'll leave that there. Encourage, if that's interesting to you at all, I would encourage you to do your own research on the Eightfold Path. There's a lot of different ideas on the Eightfold Path, and I think that's okay. It was given to me through the Forest tradition, and the Forest tradition has their unique way of talking about it. But it's all good stuff, and just reading about it and reading it, I think, is really, there's a goodness to even reading about it. When I read about it and I hear people talk about it, I leave feeling a real sense of peace and hope. So if that's something that interests you, check it out. I'm going to talk a lot more about it eventually, but right now I just wanted to land it there. So I'll pause again, and then we'll draw a name, and I'll reflect a little bit on the topic. Okay. All right. Let's draw a name. I haven't drawn. I can't talk today. Having a hard time humaning today. Haven't pulled a name. I'll just stay there. Haven't pulled a name in a minute, so happy to be there. Let's see. I want to pull a new name that I haven't pulled before. So I'm going to pull a couple names until I pull a new name. Oh for 3. 3 names I've already pulled. Let me see. Sorry for the delay. I'm looking this up real quick. Well, okay, there it was. So, the sun is going down, so I may have to turn the light on in here. See what this does. That helps out a little bit. Puts a little glow on the left side. I drew William's name, and he gave me at first a challenge of talking about things that were hard to encapsulate with words. I think talking about anything is hard to encapsulate with words. I think he was more wanting to see me reflect in a different quality of way, not necessarily so much from my head, but more from my feeling center, my feeling mind. But I pressed him for a topic and he said cosmic rhythms, which is in itself is an intangible thing. I will say that the one of the sources right now that has been the most beneficial thing in my life has been the breath. And as one really gives a lot of attention to the breath, especially in it with a lot of intent, with a lot of good intentions, one begins to see that there is a rhythm to the breath, an inflow and an outflow, and the more that our mindfulness of that experience is refined, there's a certain connection to the inflow and outflow of reality, the kind of ebb and flow, if you will. And I think there's a way to kind of wax poetic about the ebb and flow of waves and the ebb and flow of the breath, um, and that can be really beautiful and really helpful. But I don't necessarily think that inspiration always results in us having our own personal experiences with that kind of cosmic cycle of in and out. And that's an experience that's been really special to me of one noticing it in the breath, with the breath, when I stay with it for a long period of time. And then it becomes, the concentration on it becomes so um, kind of profoundly in the foreground of my awareness that I kind of start to see it everywhere. And I can see that cosmic reality and that cosmic rhythm in my relationships. Um, we have this term that's been popularized, especially in the psychological world, called attachment. What is it? Attachment styles. And I think that it can be really helpful, reflecting on attachment styles in our relationship. Um, I think we need to be careful, though, that we don't say this attachment style is good and this attachment style is bad. It's just this attachment style is. And um, part of the human reality and the human psyche is this tendency to become attached. And it's a inflow and outflow. Um, and we develop the ways that we attach to things really early on in life, those rhythms, those cosmic rhythms of attachment. And as we get to know our internal world and the way that our mind works, we can start to realize that we have our own cycles um, that exist around how we attach and detach, and how we pull things in and grab them, and how we push them away, and what that looks like. And of that, I think the more we're able to understand and kind of see that this whole human social experience is run by this in a huge way. It's so easy to see in my current relationship with Larissa how my own attachment style and the rhythms that I've created, not just with her, it's just showing up with her, but in all of my relationships, how that rhythm is. And if I'm not careful, I can kind of create some stories around that and be like, oh, it shouldn't be this way. Oh, I need to fix myself, and I need to become free of my faulty attachment styles. And what's been more helpful is just to see it as it is, and work with it and understand it. And uh, for me, one of the truest things is this realization that everything is, especially in a material realm, everything is constantly changing form. Some slower than others, but everything that's kind of coming into being or materializing is eventually going to uh, decay and die, and that's just the nature of things. That's just the way it is. That's the way things are. And the way that we attach to those those things that are constantly changing um, is really interesting. And this this kind of understanding that and watching like how I attach to those things and how I cling to them um, creates my suffering. And but um, if I'm not careful, if I get into if I try to understand that through my rational or intellectual mind, I can get into trouble, because then I'll go the other direction and I'll say, well, I just need to remain detached in life and not attached to anything. And then what I don't realize is that I'm just creating another form of attachment. I'm attaching myself to non-attachment, or what we could call aversion. I'm I'm afraid of really showing up in life because everything is impermanent, and then we suffer, and so I don't show up. And there's a middle way. There's a middle way that cannot be prescribed. It has to be realized. It has to be seen, and it's and so playing with that is really nice. That's a cosmic cycle of attachment that I have become grown very fond of um, reflecting on and watching and understanding. Um, Maybe I'll think of one more to talk about. Cosmic cycle. I think one. I think the last thing I'll talk about is that cosmic cycles are in fact that they're cyclical, um, and this is a really helpful thing, I think, for us to really spend some time looking at and thinking about and talking about, um, because at least from a Western context, we really want things to constantly be kind of ascending. But if things happen in a cyclical manner, at best, it's like a spiral staircase that's like the spirals are like really tight, like a like a like a screw where the teeth are like super close together. Where I don't know, you've probably seen them before, where the teeth are so close together it looks like it's actually just one circle after another. Um, at best, that's the way things are and the way we progress. Um, but we just come back around to the same things over and over and over and over. And I like to think that um, even the parts of ourself that are eternal, and I do believe there are parts of ourself that are deathless. But there's obviously lots of parts of us that will die when the body stops operating. And there's a lot of different thoughts and opinions about what parts of us die and what and cease to exist and change form and change shape, and which parts don't. But I do think there's a part of us that doesn't, and I think we can actually have a real, very real experience of that part of ourself before we die. And it's a very sad thing to me that a lot of people spend most of their lives running from that part of themselves, because finding it is very scary. And I don't think any of us purely find it out of our own effort and our own desire. But it can be experienced. And I, I do think that that part of us that's deathless, I like to think that it comes back in another form, whether it's a human or animal. That this idea of reincarnation just makes so much sense to me in a really deep way. Um, and in the psychological world, there's even a whole community of people that have tapped into what those past lives were. Um, and that's very interesting to me as well. Although I have a strong desire to do a ton of research there, it's pretty interesting to me. But this idea that even um, there's a huge possibility, I think, that I could have already experienced thousands of births, and um, this is just one of them. It, that type of a cyclical nature of of the human experience helps me breathe a little deeper and take some pressure off the perfectionistic parts of my personality. And it also gives me a perspective that's just so much bigger than what I can have a propensity to shrink into just my own experience and um, my small life. It gives me a bigger sense of existence than just this little small Ryan personality and reality that I've kind of created and crafted as self. Um, that I personally think is uh, gonna go away when my body does. So, anyways, I'll leave that there as some reflections on cosmic rhythms. Thank you. And as always, please send me feedback if you watch this. Um, I'm gonna wait. It looks like. Okay, looks like we're back a little bit, but the connection's really low. Um, yeah, please send me some feedback, um, even if it's just a little, or if you disagree with a lot of it, or didn't like it, or um, wish I wouldn't have said something, wish I would have said more, have any other thoughts on it, other perspectives, um, please send them my way. Um, but I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your night or whatever day it is. Um, and yeah, thanks for tuning in or watching.